out your baskets and have it on its way to you.
Hello then, a very good morning to you watching Create and Craft. My name is Debbie Shaw and this is Ms. Jennie Rayment. Hello!
And back again with the Quilting Classroom. Yes, we have 3 more blocks to do today. We've got the kaleidoscope block, the Celtic block and the 5-point star block because we're making this here quag. In case you don't know what a quag is a quilt what turned into a bag. Okay, there is the bag, here is the quilt. Whip it out quick. Refrain from saying anything to that.
Here we go.
It's Sunday morning after all. Right, I grab the end, Deb. And here we have the quilt. And what we are doing today is we're doing the 5-pointed star, a usual bit of fluff. We're going to do the Celtic block, put on down the bottom there. And we're going to do kaleidoscope in the corner.
Lovely,
so
right here.
That's and we've got all the stuff, all the templates, all the gadgets, all the gizmos right here for you today.
If you want to get ahead of the game as far as the products that we're using, have a look on the website. When you go to the website, you will see the show now on the home page, but if you hover your cursor over the sewing section and go down to Classroom, there will be video there eventually. It wasn't on there this morning, obviously, because we haven't done it yet.
We're here now!
So we'll get on with that. We'll get on with showing you what we've got in the show.
PDF,
and then you can get
PDF loaded, apparently.
Oh, is it?
Yes, PDF is loaded on the Classroom thing, because there are words what go with it. And if they miss out on the words, they are on my website. You have to download them for yourselves. I am not sending them out in any more newsletters. So pineapples have finished, okay? Many of you will know all about the pineapples. They are over.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
I'm told there are no
I'm glad
more
about that. Yes.
I had a bit of a problem with the PDF, you see.
Oh,
yes, with the pineapple block instructions. Some people had 52 copies. Some people only had 1.
Did some people not get any?
Some people didn't get any.
Oh, okay.
You see, so they just arrived in heaps in various places.
Probably as well to do it yourself then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Right, now we have got fabulous fabrics for you. This is applique.
Yes. What I like about these is they've been chosen, they've been put together.
Yeah.
So even if you're not going to make the designs on the particular show, those 5 colours will go together and make a very pleasing, harmonious piece of work. You have 3 full half metres, 2 whole metres of fabric. It's a jolly good price for that, and they're lovely, wonderful cotton materials. Really high quality, nice to work with. You can wash them if you want to beforehand. You can perhaps give them a bit of spray starch before you cut them up to give them a bit of extra body. But those are really super fabrics. They are from such a great British company.
And, you know, I would never have gone into a fabric shop and think, right, I'll have a little bit of lilac and a bit of green together.
Yes.
But don't they go so well?
They go very, very well together.
And I just want to show you size-wise. These aren't fat quarters. Your ½ metre is ½ metre as in off the length of the roll.
Yeah, a proper half metre.
Proper
and
half
then your
metre.
metre is a metre as in a metre, which is twice the size of the bit you've got. I must confess, they're lovely colours for spring. There you are, hide me completely. They're just lovely. And if you're stuck for colour choice, you don't know what to do, it's there. It's been chosen for you. We've got the purple and green colourway, and there's another one. So if you're not a purple person, because not everyone's a purple person. I'm not really a purple. Are you a purple person?
I don't mind this purple.
No, I don't mind
I'm not
that
a bright purple, but
no,
I do
I'm
like
bright
that purple
purple
person. But if you're not a purple person, that is a applique, but we've got a applique if you're not a purple person.
If you're a red person, now red, scarlet woman, you see, well, actually it's not that red, it's a lovely soft red.
It's a rusty colour,
and those are such wonderfully Englishy colours. I mean, they'll go anywhere for anybody. You've got your sort of your rosy colour, the soft green, and a soft paler rose. I mean, it's English rose colours, and again, they all go together. So that's possibly the background fabric.
And it's even that's got a dot on it, isn't it? If you can see that.
It's not absolutely dead plain. Because you really shouldn't mix a plain with prints, because the plain then stands out like there's no tomorrow. But it's got a tiny, tiny dot on it, just enough to take it off from being a dead plain flat fabric.
Okay,
That's great.
And same deal, so a metre of those 2 at the bottom and ½ metre of those 3 at the top. £35.09 is your price, 299158 is your item number.
That's a good price.
Okay, it is, isn't it?
When you consider that is a
3.5
very good
metres.
3.5 metres for that.
Yeah.
I mean, most fabric's about 12 quid in the shops these days.
Yeah.
So you're getting 3.5 metres for 35, not bad at all. Right, templates, Debs. We need templates for my class today. We need, this is not a mouth, we need the bias ruler, because we're going to be cutting bias, and that takes the hard sums out of it. You can get the edge of your fabric, you know, the 45-degree cut, easy peasy. So we need that. We need the kaleidoscope one. And the kaleidoscope pattern is the one that we're going to be using. You can use it both ways up. for making the design we have right here. So there is your kaleidoscope one. You'd need the bias, Debbie, for both round the edge of the 5-point star, which is also the other template that's included in this set. What Easy Quilting have done is they've given us, let's have it the right way up, that's the Australian viewers. What Easy Quilters have given us is the templates needed for the show in one little kit.
Okay.
So this does your 5-star here, but it will also do, and I'm not demonstrating it on this show, but I will at the 10 o'clock show, the clamshell. And the clamshell is, and Drunkard's Path is on the quilt on the wall here, the brown and greeny one. So that, in fact, combines both the 5-star and the Drunkard's Path template. So you've got 2 templates in one. Not difficult to use at all, particularly the Drunkard's Path one. And indeed, the bias one will be very useful for the Celtic. So those 3 templates will be great for what we're doing on this show.
So you're getting a multi-line postage territory with your next order. So you need your fabric, you'll need your templates. Your templates are £42.29. They're on FlexiPay. So you can split that cost into 2. So today it's £21.15. That means when you order your fabric as well, you can split the cost of your fabric in half as well, which is just under £18 if you wanted to add that to your order. Then we have a marker bundle and pins. Do we need this as well?
You always need it, Debbie. You've got various different pens for either drawing that are air erasable, i.e. they vanish with air. You've got a jolly good creaser for pressing your seams open and a point turner for sort of poking the points out. A needle keeper, magnetic, so it means that when you've got your pins or your needles in there, they can't fall out. Safety. My favourite pins, the flower head pins. Invisible thread, and the reason why it's invisible, of course, you can sew across any colour with it. And you don't have to keep changing threads. And as well, a jolly good pack of different marking pens for your light, your medium, your dark fabric, and indeed for marking on your template. So such a useful bundle. If you haven't got that little lot at that price, it's well worth chucking in.
And that price is only £13.49. That's 303287. Then we're going to move on to...
Okay, you've got to have these. If you're going to do any form of patchwork and you want to start and you're not sure, or maybe you haven't got a lot of space, you've got here the 3 tools that I feel are probably the best to begin with. There's a new DVD coming out called Easy Peasy Patchwork, which will be available on Create and Craft, and it needs that, and that. Okay. Whether you have those sizes, whether you have bigger ones, but those sizes being the medium size of the range, I think are good. They're nice solid templates. You can pop them away. They don't take up too much space. So we have ruler, 13-inch by 6.5-inch ruler. The backing peels off, you can see through it, marked out in all sorts of measurements, including 1/8 of an inch. You have the square, measures every size of square up to 6.5 inches. And you have the easy angle, which is a half square triangle, and 2 of them there, when fit together, make a square. And with those tools, you can do an awful lot of designs.
Okay, they're £26.99 for all 3. 275325, your item number there. Then you have your circle and scallop ruler.
Right, now this is useful because it's both a compass. If you turn it over, on the back it will show you, if we move the ruler slightly out of the way, it shows you how you can use it to draw a scallop. It also shows you how you can use it to draw a circle. I find it very good as a drafting ruler because it's marked out at 1/8 of an inch. And if I want to add 1/4 of an inch onto anything, this is a really good tool to add it because I can put it on the fabric, draw my 1/4 of an inch, it sits on the fabric. This is one of those useful bits of kit that one wouldn't want to be without. And I know many of my students have bought one. It's just a useful bit. It's a compass, it's a scallop thing, it's also a design tool.
And it's only £11.69. 303499 is your item number there. Then we have your quilting ruler. Would I use this in conjunction with one of the rulers or instead of?
I have many rulers. In Jennifer's house there are many, many rulers. This I find
You're the main one.
particularly useful because a lot of the patchwork blocks in the patchwork world are a 12.5-inch square. Consequently, you don't have to fuss about measuring, you can just cut round it. It's great for scrapbookers because they want things up to 12 inches. So once more, you've got it marked out at 1/8 of an inch because in the patchwork world we work to that. Many people watching are probably thinking, why are we talking feet and inches? That's because the main driver in the patchwork world is America, who are feet and inches. And even if you're in centimetres, you needn't worry because you're just looking at a number.
Yes.
And as long as you work to the right numbers, whether it's centimetres or whether it's inches, it's fine, but you mustn't mix the two. So that does, for someone worried with centimetres, that's your 12.5-inch square.
Okay, that's 303500, and that's £15.29. We've also got your rotary cutter and mat. We got the big one.
Thank goodness
we
for
do a little
that.
one.
I like the big
but
one.
we got the big one.
We see the big one fits the square.
Yeah.
And you don't fall off the edge.
No.
And the big one fits the rulers. No, that's good. And with it, there is the rotary cutter, the righty, lefty, righty, lefty, righty, lefty. Do I need to rabbit home anymore? Rotary cutter. No need to change anything, just change hands. And a spare blade. Cracking bit of kit, and at still a good price.
It is £22.49. 259153. We have the buyer's tape maker on the show for you as well.
Tape.
Funny that, isn't it?
Yes,
They should call it a
exactly.
buyer's tape maker.
They should indeed. I wonder why they haven't thought of calling it a buyer's tape maker. Right, this buyer's tape maker makes buyer's tape. And basically how it works is the tape gets fed through here, comes out the end, it presses it as it goes, got a temperature gauge, and you can have all sorts of different heads, which we will tell them about in just a minute. Right.
Okay.
Do you
And
need
it's
to
on
have
Flexi.
On
Yes.
Flexi.
£53.99, 2 payments of £27. That again means you've got your Flexi basket. So why don't you stick your mini iron in it?
And it's not for ironing minis. You can iron Rolls Royces with it. You can iron all sorts of other cars with it. No, you do not iron your car with this iron. This iron is great for getting into all those little nooks and crannies, taking for class. It's lightweight. It has 2 heat controls. It has a low and a high, and just a useful bit of kit to have. If you can't move around the sewing room, so if you can't get up, that you want to have by your side. You just press the little seams, and if you're into miniatures or doll's house things, or he or she's got fancy shirts with ruffles and things on, that presses into the little ruffles a treat.
Does get very
Baby
hot.
clothes,
Just be
christening
warned.
garments.
It's not a
Just
toy.
be hot. No, it isn't a toy.
It's £35.99, and that's 192527. Now we do have some bundles to go with your buyer's tape maker. Very
You're going
fine
to
ones
need
to
that.
start with.
Need
Okay.
that for today's show. That's the 1/4 inch head. And that does your 1/4 inch bias, which is ideal for your Celtic work, your stained glass window work, etc., etc. You've got a pokey tool, because that's jolly good for poking the bias into the tool there. And indeed, you've then got the little tiny weeny 1/8 of an inch one. I'm not using the 1/8 of an inch head today, but it is very useful if you want the finest bit of piping down a garment of some sort, or perhaps you want to do writing. You can then make your own bias binding out of any fabric your little heart desireth.
And pop those on your order for £10.79, 192681. We've got some clips for you next. These are really useful, aren't they? Particularly if you're...
Oh, they're good, those clips.
I'm thinking things like handbag making. The fabric is too stiff to pop a pin in.
Yes, they are absolutely superb. They've got a flat bottom, so when you're working on the machine, they don't catch on there. And again, when you're working on the machine, all you've got to do is hit the top and it just pulls off. Strong, firm, they're meant for binding, but I can see them for using absolutely anything.
Yeah.
You know, if you're wanting to glue something together, that will hold it nice and flat and clip it well. Nice clips, hang on to them, and if you're taking them to class, mark them, because they're not the cheapest of clips, but everyone wants to have them. You put your blob of bright coloured nail varnish or something on them.
That's a good idea. They're only £7.19, 274050. Right, we ought to start. Well, you ought to start quilting.
Yes, I
Mrs.
ought to start quilting.
You take a look on... I shall see you in a sec. Have a look at the website. That'll give you the details of everything else we need. You've got some extra buyer's tips on there to go with your buyer's binder maker. Do order that large mat and the rotary cutter bundle, because that is such a fantastic deal, and we don't always have it in stock. You'll find that very, very useful, whether you're making Jennie's quilt, as you're going to see today, or whether you're not. It's just incredibly useful. Centimetres and inches, and you can use it for your paper crafting as well. So that's createandcraft.tv. If you're not familiar with these shows, then Jennie's going to be demonstrating for around about the next 45 minutes all by herself. I've got my coffee. But if you've got any emails or questions that you want to send in, then do send them in, but we're going to be saving them till the end of the show. If we don't get time in the show, we're back again at 10 o'clock this morning. Remember, it's not 11 o'clock as normal on a Sunday, it's 10 o'clock, and we can answer any questions that we have for you there. But I think she's ready, set, so let's get quilting.
Friends, Romans and countrymen, lend me your ears or your eyes, and I hope you've pressed record, because I'm not going to do this again. The 8 o'clock show is the only show you actually get in the classroom. When it comes to 10 o'clock, we'll be demonstrating more products, but you won't get the teaching. Now, we need to keep this classroom, so keep your emails coming in saying how wonderful or how awful I am. You can nitpick, I don't mind. Right, we're going to be doing 3 blocks. We're going to work our way through the kaleidoscope. We're going to work our way through a bit of Celtic, and although I've only done the Celtic to the very simplest, you will see how you can do it, and you can construct your own very complicated creations if you wish. And we're going to do the 5-point star. Now, the fabrics that we have today on the show, the 2 different packs, there is enough material there to do the entire quag. That's the top of the quag and the panel that the quag goes into. We will do the other blocks on the next classroom, which is probably at the end of March. So your 3½ meters, your 2 meters will do all the designs and the front panel for the quag. Let me put those out the way because it's too tempting to cut into them. I'll pop them there. I'm going to begin with the 5-point star. Now, on the 5-point star template, you also get the templates to do Drunkard's Path and the clamshell. When you look at the back of the template, it does have a certain amount of instructions for piecing the 5-point star. The clamshell and the Drunkard's Path are actually not difficult to piece, but this one can take a little bit of trouble. You might want to do it by, oh dear, nasty cough, hand, although I must confess I want to use the sewing machine. Right, we're going to begin with the 5-point star. Now, the 5-point star that I have here, I have actually applied to a background square. And I'm about to remove the backing from it because I can save this for something else. You are going to need, at some point, when you're doing your 5-point star, a 14½-inch square as the background. We'll come to how you cut that out shortly. But how do I make the 5-point star? There are a series of templates. You have 2 templates that relate. You have a funny-shaped arc, and you've got a diamond shape. You will need to cut, strangely enough, 5 of those and 5 of those. And how the design vaguely goes together is cut your pieces out, and when you do cut them out, save fabric. Can you see? If I cut mine out as near as I can do, I can utilize the lines in between. So it's save material. Don't do one in the middle. Cut the 5 pieces out, and the design goes together like this. The 5-star pieces go in the center. There we go. Now, there's one thing about this design, one quite important thing, and that is the seaming required. Now, some of you staring at it will be thinking, ooh, I wonder if it's one of those. Yes, you're probably right. What we've got here is a whole series of something called a Y seam. In fact, every single seam is a Y seam. And what a Y seam is, or sometimes called an insertion seam, is where you sew almost all of the seam between the pieces, but you leave a gap because you have to insert that section. There's nowhere on this design where you can sew straight across. So you have to think about it a little bit. How I would start to join it together is I would take 2 of the star pieces. They need to go right sides together. And the only little bit you want to sew on this is to start your stitching at the very edge here, and you sew with 1/4 inch along, and you stop. There is a little dot. You can actually mark it with a little dot. We've got a whole series of marking pens. And you sew to the little dot. You do not go any further. And it's going to look something like this when you've done it. Can you see, if I open it out there, where I've stopped on the little dot? That means there's a little bit of space left at the very top of the shape. What will happen now is I will take the other section, this piece, and he's going to get inserted. Slip it in there, and if you then take one side, pop it on the top, and what I'm doing is lining up the edges of the top piece with the edges of the bit underneath, and I've also marked it with a little dot 1/4 inch in. And if you get your mark to mark there and lined up, you'll be ready to sew. And all you're going to do is to sew from here to the very end, a nice straight line. Let me do this. So on the sewing machine, I've got my 2 little dots lined up. You'll be able to do it sitting down and the right way on. I've got my machine slightly to one side. Going to set my machine to do 1/4 inch. Now, this little machine does come with a really nice 1/4 inch foot, but I'm just moving the needle over to save changing the foot, basically idle. Keeping the raw edges together, lower your presser foot. I've started on that mythical dot, and I'm going to sew down the edge here. let's go, there we go. Doing a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, if you were having problems with your 1/4 inch seam allowance, I did comment that that very nice plastic rule that we have, let me find where I put mine, where's it gone, this one, is remarkably good. If you need to draw a 1/4 inch down your fabric, that will give you a very accurate 1/4 inch. So if you're worried about sewing the 1/4 inch, don't be. Use the ruler and draw a line. When you've sewn down that one seam there, that's when you can see I started. Now notice where I started. I started on the dot and sewed to the end. What can happen now is I can swivel it round and replace it so that I can line up on the other side. And you'll never guess what I'm going to do then. I'm going to start my stitching there and sew up to this little dot, thereby inserting that section of yellow into that shape. And it's going to look something like this when I've done. Notice it is now being inserted. At this point in time, don't worry about the seams at all. Having done that with 2 of those, you're going to do exactly the same thing with 2 more of them. So do that twice. Insert a section. But you've got another piece of the star to go. What you'll need to do with that piece of the star is join it to one of these 2 halves. It doesn't really matter which. Put it on top. And this time, you are going to be sewing along here, starting in at that mythical dot and ending at the mythical dot again. Because in the middle here, I'm afraid, we've got another insertion technique. Can you see the Y seam? So pop this little Charlie on there, start again, and I like to start sewing on the dot. And the way that I would do it is put it underneath my presser foot, hand drop the needle down so I know I've got through the dot itself, lower the presser foot, proceed to sew, making a mental note of where I'm going to stop. So along there. If you've got a machine that does a tie-off or a fix button, here's quite a good place to stop and fix it. If you haven't, you could go try, get my mouths together, you could try going backwards if you wanted to. Or, if you've got some way of lowering your feed dogs, you can stitch on the spot. Or, you can just hang on to it and do a couple of stitches virtually in place. So I've now sewn right from one end to t'other, leaving a gap at that end. What I can now do, and you'll never guess what happens, is insert that section into that piece. So much the same thing again. Open it, sew from the centre to the edge. When you've done, turn it round. I mean, there's nothing difficult about doing this particular block if you understand this Y seam. And you might say to yourself, I'll do it by hand. Once you've got the 3 together and the 2 together, all you are going to do is then join the entire pieces. And we join this section to that section. And again, it's an insertion technique. Join him, twiddle it round. When you've joined those 2 bits together, you'll insert one piece there and you'll insert one piece there. It should, with luck, says she, be a circle. And there we had the circle. And it's at this stage now where I will iron it like mad. I will really give it a very, very good flatten. If you find that in the centre it's got a little bit puckered, don't panic. What would look remarkably good, and I'm not certain where I put mine, can't remember where it is now, is a button in the middle. It actually wants something in the centre, you know, so put a button in the middle. Now, this, if you wished, if you were feeling very brave, and it does tell you how to do it on the back of the packet, you could actually insert this into 4 of these L-shaped sections. Now, that would be feeling very brave, and I don't feel that brave ever. I've actually got a 14.5 inch square to put it on. Now, if you're going to cut a 14.5 inch square, you might have a problem, because you could say to yourself, oh dear, I've only got a 12.5 inch ruler. Well, you've got a 12.5 inch ruler, and you've got a 2 inch one. And what I do when it comes to drawing a large square, or wanting a large square, take my piece of fabric, stick the ruler in one corner. That is a 12.5 inch square. If I add this to the side of it, 2 and 12.5 make, go on, I know it's early, 14.5. What I can do then is literally draw around the edges of it, move the ruler to here, and then I can cut myself out an accurate 14.5-inch square. Well, I could if it wasn't leaning on one of the templates. Up there. So using two rulers together can actually be very useful. When I've drawn all the way around it, just draw along the bottom there, I can then cut out with the rotary cutter using one of the rulers along the line and literally cut up here, move the template along there and cut myself out an accurate square. You don't need to see me doing that because I've already got one. Right, let's pop that to one side. Having got your 14.5-inch square, this is going to be placed in the center of it. And if you iron your square in half, comme ça, that's French for like this, open it out and iron it in half again, that will help you to find the middle. You know where the middle is of that design, get middle to middle. What I like to have is so that one point of the star is lying on the center crease. So at least it's upright. I mean, if you want to have it like that, you can, but I personally, you know, I'm fussy. Sometimes I can be a real Mrs. Picky Pants, and I like to have the point going that way. Now, at that stage, you will need to pin the thing down like there's no tomorrow. And I'd put pins on every point and pins in between, because I'm going to tack this to the backing fabric. When it comes to tacking, this could be done by hand, or it could be done on the sewing machine. If you're going to do your tacking on the sewing machine, and incidentally, don't be confused if ever I use the word baste. Basting in America means tacking. So if you pick up an American book and it says, oh, baste, that's what it means, do a tack, a long stitch. I've tacked round the edge using a black thread and the longest stitch length possible on the sewing machine. And do go round carefully, because if you don't go round carefully and you haven't pinned it properly, when you get back to the other end, you can get a bit of creep where one fabric's crept more than the other, and then you'll have to undo it. Now, the problem is we've now got this very nice 5-pointed start stuck on a bit of backing fabric, but it's got a raw edge. How can I get rid of the raw edge? And the answer to that is bind it. Now, I bound mine with bias binding. There are two ways, with probably several ways, you can actually bind the edge of this. One way is to use one of the quilt tips on the bias binding making machine and fold a strip of fabric directly in half. And I've got a 1.5-inch wide strip of fabric cut on the bias. And when you come to cut your fabric on the bias, that bias ruler will be remarkably useful. A way of getting rid of the raw edge is to take a strip of fabric, fold it in half, and sew round. And how you use it is you sew round so that the raw edge of the binding is exactly aligned with the raw edge of the circle. And it's going to work something like this. Stick it under. You want to sew round with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You will have regular stitching. I'm just making to make a longer stitch because I need to rip this off in a minute. And as you go round, you will keep the raw edge. It is a nice machine, this machine. What I like about it is it's nice and lightweight and you can carry it easily. I've got a thread caught up there. Let's just cut it away from the back. It's the trouble with being at a funny angle. You can't see always. Can't see in any case, really. Down there. And you will proceed all the way round the entire thing. Very quickly, how you join the ends together is like this. So once you've sewn all the way round, you will be coming back up the other end here. Incidentally, if you have to have a join in any bias strip, ever, no matter what you're doing, always press the join open and flat and trim any excess fabric off. How you join the ends together when you come back again is you'd open this part out, fold a raw edge over, move that out of the way there, take this little end, cut the end off nice and flush, lay that Charlie inside there, fold that over, and then you would sew exactly straight past. Once you've gone all the way around, the way you get rid of the raw edge is you simply fold it back on itself and you catch it down. And if you fold it back, it will cover that raw edge. If there are any little bits sticking out, you can trim them off. Now, the snag with that, although that's very easy, it does make it quite bulky. And I actually prefer to do this. This is using a flat bit of bias binding, just made by putting the 1/4 inch tip on the bias binding maker. Here is the bias binding maker, and I have actually already made some this morning. Now, a little tip for you. When you are using the 1/4 inch head, what I do is I cut my strips a fraction bigger than the required 1/2 inch. So they are nearly 5/8, so a bit more than 1/2 inch. Having cut them, I will then just leave them on the ironing board and give them a blast of some form of spray starch. You don't iron them, you leave them slightly wet. Feed them through the head, and as it comes through, because it's got a bit of starch on it, it comes out beautifully flat. I used to spray starch and then cut it out. I'm now using the starch after I've cut it out and then letting the machine press it for me. And it just sends it out by the yard. If you have got a join in it, you might have to just help it a little bit. But that works a treat. So how do I use this? How you would use it is you take the bias and you literally lay it down over the raw edge. I would tack it in place, then sew either side. When it comes to stitching either side, you could use this little sewing machine because it has a very nice little quilting stitch on it. One of the stitches down the side here, you can use this little one down there. Or, of course, you could use a decorative stitch, or, perish the thought, you could do it by hand. I have to confess that when it comes to joining the ends together, it was a bit of a jiggle. But the end result, I thought, was flatter using plain, ordinary bias strip. And I joined the ends together by literally, you can see it here, the camera comes in there, by just folding the raw edge over of the leading one on top of the other one and stitching that down with, I'm afraid I did use a couple of hand stitches, much to my husband's surprise. So the 5-point star, once it's been applied to its 14.5 inch square, to get rid of any excess fabric and also save material, I cut the back away. When you come to cut the back away, be very careful and do not cut through the front, because otherwise you've just ruined the entire 5-point star. Right, that was, very briefly, the 5-point star. Let me... dear. Coughing and spluttering. Perhaps a glass of water might be useful. Let's have a look at how we're going to do the Celtic. It's all this talking, you see. The Celtic design is made, oh brilliant, you know, magic fingers are excellent. Cheers. And it's water, I'm afraid, folks. Far too early to have anything else. Allow me to give it back to you. Oh, this is marvellous. I have a servant as well. Now, when it comes to doing the Celtic, you have a variety of different things you can do with Celtic. The very simplest Celtic is just literally a wiggle round, round, round. And the thing that distinguishes a Celtic design is it's a continuum. It's a line that has no beginning, it has no end. And it goes over and under and over and under and over and under as you work your way round. You could, of course, be a bit more complex. And this is actually 2 what is known as chords going round. Angela Madden is remarkably good at doing this. I only do it because I quite like doing it occasionally. Here again, you've got 2 complex patterns going round, and on this one, we've got a design going round. They all have one thing in common. They use bias strips. To make the design that I have here, I've gone for a very, very simple little loop. Made the design using the bias strips, and I filled in the holes with colour. You don't have to. Now, your problem is, how are we going to make the design? To make the design, you need a piece of tracing paper. You can use greaseproof paper, baking parchment, anything you like. You fold a piece of paper in half and in half again. And then you fold it in half on the diagonal. Now, the trick when doing this is if you bring one fold over to one side and then fold the other one back to the other side. Now, why? Why don't I just do that? The reason why I don't do that is that the top piece of fabric is going double the distance because it's coming over the bottom one. And if ever you do Hawaiian applique, you will always have to fold your fabric before you cut it out like this, so that that fold goes the same distance as does that fold. Now, if you're going to do a form of continuous design, what you need to do on this bit of paper is to draw a line connecting this side to that side. Now, to go straight across would be very boring, so one's going to put a loop in. I, because I'm a fussy what's-it, quite like to have that loop in the middle. So to get it in the middle, I will then fold the top piece of fabric over again. And that gives me half the design. Now, to get the loop, I suddenly thought, aha, what I need is something to draw around. Ooh, I could use a CD. Now, you could, and don't use one of my CDs, all right? I know many of you have got that. Don't use that because you might scratch it. So what I did with this when it came to drawing the loop around it is on the fold, just literally drew part of the arc of my CD or DVD or whatever it is. Don't use the very best one and don't scratch it. I then drew another line just connecting it to the edge. This gets to be repeated round the entire thing. Now, you could go solemnly round, tracing it off, tracing it off, tracing it off, or you could use this little trick. And the little trick that I used, rather than tracing it off, was to fold it one more time, so I got a shape like that. I took the thread out of the sewing machine needle. Do not do it with the thread in the sewing machine needle. And I literally sewed along the lines. What that did, let's pop those out the way, is it actually pricked the design out all round the fabric. And I was able, I think with the camera and getting close enough to see the little prick marks on there. They were. I was able then to go over the lines with a pen and blacken them up. And that saved an awful lot of tracing round, tracing round, tracing round, tracing round. But remember to take the thread out of the sewing machine. Otherwise, you might end up with a problem because you have to undo it. Having got my design done, what I had to do then was to transfer it onto a piece of fabric. Now, there are a variety of ways of doing it. One way of doing this is to make a homemade light box, if, of course, you're not lucky enough to own a light box. That is where that square is remarkably useful, because you can balance this square on top of some light of some sort, do it safely, make sure the children and the dogs and everyone else aren't there, and then put a piece of fabric on the top and draw the lines. If that doesn't, you don't like that idea, you can do what I did, which was to pin my design to the back of my 14.5-inch square, and you need another 14.5-inch square for this, and stick it in the window. So 14.5-inch square, pin the design on top, and literally draw around it. And the neighbours, I think, thought I'd gone potty as I'm there, solemnly drawing the lines on the window. Of course, I had to do it more than once, because you have to have here's ones I did earlier. So once you've got your pattern on, that's when you can start to add the colour. Now, when it came to adding the colour, the easiest way to add the colour was to actually photocopy my initial pattern. So I did the photocopying, because then I could use these shapes as templates. Now, you have to appreciate, this is the very basic way of doing Celtic, and when you do Celtic with all the specialists that are out there, they've got all sorts of natty gizmos and tools. This is just a basic way of getting some colour. I then cut out templates. And if you're lucky and they're all the same size, then you can use just the one, a multi-cut, or you'd have to cut lots of separate ones. If you prefer, you can cut your fabric out, lay it in place, and then hand tack it on, which I actually did with this one. Yep, for those of you out there, you disbelieving what's-its, I did sit down and I hand tacked them on. I removed the tacking stitches afterwards. What I have done with my samples for this show, simply for speed, is I'm afraid I bonded it on. So it was bonded on. Now, this is okay, it's fine, but it is much flatter, and it means I can't stuff or pad the work from behind afterwards because it's stuck. But once you've bonded the shapes on, you are going to need a lot of that 1/4 inch bias binding. And you don't have to have it in one long piece, because you can actually use it up in short lengths. You want to start, and on my particular design here, I'm going to start at this junction. And the reason for starting at that junction is I'm going to go along here, I'm going to go round the top of this, roundy, 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 and then this piece will come over the end of that. Thereby, this raw end will eventually be tucked under that. And this is the clue to Celtic, is you can get rid of a raw edge in and under. So, if you look at this end, I started here. Leave a little tail. It's always better to have a bit more rather than not enough. I went round there. I went over that. I went round the next one. I went over that. And I've got to this shape. Well, there isn't enough of my bias to get all the way round there and to get to that next point, which will be another under. I mean, okay, I could cheat a bit, and who's going to count whether you've got enough overs and unders? No one's probably ever going to notice. But what I'm going to do is actually finish my design there, take another piece of bias, butt it up to it, put it on there, and keep on going. So go round there, round there, round there, round there, up there, roundy, 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 and eventually to the beginning. This bias would need to be held in place. Now, there are various tutors out there who will teach you sticking it on. You may want to stick it on. You could put thin bits of a fusible web on the back. You could use some form of basting glue. I didn't have any of those, so I'm afraid I had to tack mine on. And because I was feeling idle, I actually tacked it on the sewing machine. But you do need about 25 fingers for doing that. Once you've got the design tacked on, hey, come on, it's a nice thing to sit and sew in the evening. You know, you can talk to your partner, talk to the dog, the walls, watch the telly, watch, create and craft, and learn yet more, and do a bit of hand sewing. What's going to happen when you get to the very end is, here's the strip I'm working with, there's my starting point. I am going to cut these two pieces off so that they will be flush, and I can then tuck them underneath that little piece. So I'm just going to cut this off roughly, in case I have to do it again on the 10 o'clock show, and this one will get cut off roughly. You will cut it off beautifully, and these two pieces will get joined together underneath that little one there. You happy? Do you understand that? So over, under, over, under. When you've got it tacked in place, it is a question of a bit of stitching all the way around the entire thing. And now, that can be done on the machine. As you're sewing round, it pays when you come round on the top and you come to a junction where the strip is going over, jump across it. I don't know whether the camera can pick up the fact that my jumped across stitch is still there. So that your stitching follows the line of the bias and it doesn't interrupt the shape. So you get this continuum going round and round and round and round. Lynette Harris, she's a lady who does Stitch Witch, she often advocates the use of a twin needle. And if you use a wide twin needle, you will get stitching either side. I use just the blind hem stitch, or sometimes do it by hand because it's relaxing. So you'll sew round both sides. Right, we've had a quick look at Celtic. Let's have a look at the final block, Kaleidoscope. The Kaleidoscope block is this one, and it uses the 45-degree template. Let's reach across to the whole lot. And it also needs the easy angle. If you are getting your various pieces for these blocks, I know you can buy them separately, and if you want to just buy the Kaleidoscope one, you can just buy the 45-degree triangle. And how the design works, it comes from a strip. Let me clear my stuff out the way here. That's it. I usually throw it on the floor, but this is my special classroom. Have you seen it? Isn't it wonderful? All my space just for me. I can make as much mess as I like. Well, I can't really because they'll get cross with me. I have been provided with a large waste paper bin this time, which in fact I managed to miss on most of the occasions when I've thrown anything on the floor. When it comes to doing the Kaleidoscope, you are going to need either just one plain piece of fabric or you're going to use strips. I use the entire size of the template. So if you're going to do that, you're going to want either a 6.5-inch strip cut from your fabric, and that is why this ruler is so useful, because it's 6.5 inches. You just literally cut along the sides of the ruler. And I joined, or you can use a series of strips stitched together. So you could either use a plain 6.5-inch strip, or you could use a series of strips. Quite deliberately, I chose to cut strips that were not the same size. Now, this band measures 6.5 inches raw edge to raw edge. What's its finished measurement? What's its real measurement? Yep, you're right, it's 6 inches, because we take a 1/4 inch off this side and a 1/4 inch off that side. So you actually need to end up with, or when you finish your sewing, the band will measure 6 inches. So if you wished to work out your sizes, all you've got to do is to divide 6 by whatever amount of colours you're going to use. Well, you could divide 6 by 4 and it goes 1.5, but that will give me equal strips. Or I could have, say, 2 at 1.5, and that's 3. Well, 3 I could divide into 1 at 1 and 1 at 2. So as long as the numbers add up to 6, then you add your seam allowances, you can use strips of any size you like to make into a 6.5-inch band. If that phases you, just cut a 6.5-inch strip. From that band, you're going to need to cut 8 pieces. What I like to do with my strips is when I've joined them together, I will sew up and down, trying to keep the fibres going one way and back again, so you don't sew them all in the same direction. But once they've been stitched, I'll press the seams flat. And this is where something like the clover iron is very useful. It's not on at the moment, and when it is on, be careful, it gets hot. This is good because it'll just press the seam. What you don't want to do when you're ironing is damage the outside edges. And you are pressing, you're not actually ironing. Ironing is what you do with the shirts. Pressing is when you put the iron on and you press it. You only iron it when you can't get it to lie flat. Having cut my band, what I will do initially, let me start here so you can see how I would make the first cut. Pop the ruler on top, aligning it with the edges there and there. Cut up one side. Don't ever cut towards you. Flip the template over, and you will need to cut from this strip 8 pieces. And we have one up there, and then you flip the template over, and we have one up there. Now, the reason for using strips that were not the same width means that when I put the designs together, I haven't got to worry about anything matching up. I'm afraid I had like an easy life. I don't want the struggle of matching up the various seams. Those seams will not match up at all. How do I sew it together? You would sew it together like this. So let's lay it out. Here's the various pieces. I have no idea of how many hours I spend doing here's ones I did earlier. All for you. Go on, get the violins out. Let's play with the violins. Oh dear, Mistress Rayment, twiddler and fiddler. There we go. So here's the 8 pieces. I'm just waffling. It gives me time to lay the pieces out and think about what I'm doing. That's it there. So there are my 8 sections. I like to stitch it together in sets of 2. So I'll join those 2 together, those 2 together, those 2 together, those 2 together. When it comes to joining the sections together, it's nothing more complex than putting one on top of t'other and stitching right the way down the edge there. When it comes to sewing down the edge, I very often will start this end and sew to the other end, simply because it's easier to put a larger piece underneath the sewing machine than it is to start on a small sample, because sometimes it can screw it up or catch underneath the machine. At this point, when you've done that, you want to very lightly open the back seam. And here again, the Clover mini iron is remarkably good because it'll just press that back seam. If you iron the edges of these shapes, you'll find that they'll stretch, so be careful. Right, I will join 2 together, 2 together, 2 together, 2 together, making sets of 2. Now I'm just going to change colours, because I balked at sewing even more strips together and decided I'd just use one entire strip. So for those of you who've taken the easy option, just cut one strip, you will have 4 sets of 2. As indeed you'd have if you sewed those together. So when you've got your 4 sets of 2, you'll never believe what we do then. We take those 2 pieces, put them right sides together, and join those, making 2 halves. Come on, patchwork is dead easy once you've got the hang of it. When you've got the 2 halves, you are then going to join the 2 halves together. And what we're watching is to get this point here and that point there lined up. But buttons are brill, so if you don't get them lined up, put a button in the middle. Put them together like that. Now, in the seams, because you press the seams open and flat, I don't know whether you can see it because the lights, the colours aren't very good here, but there's a sort of V shape there. The base of that V is in fact the top of the points on the right side, and that's where you need to sew through. So if you have to deviate in your seam allowance, deviate through the points. Okay, once we've got the thing together, you will end up with an octagon. Now, for those of you who are perhaps not making the quag, this can just be left as it is, and it will need to be squared off. And that is where the easy angle is so useful, because in order to square it off, what I want is triangles to go on the corners. And if I get them around the right way, I can actually use this to work out the size of triangle that I need to cut to go on each of the 4 corners. And a triangle, a triangle, a triangle, a triangle. And that would make it into a square block. But we don't want to do that. We want to have a block that fits our network, don't we? Okay, so there are my 8 sections stitched together. Beautifully pressed open and flat. If it's a bit wobbly in the middle, that's where you actually iron it. Okay, you really dig in with the iron and flatten it. Because this design only actually measures 12.5 inches from one side to the other, I need to increase its size so it will come to fit all the other block designs we've done, 14.5 inches. The easiest way to do that is to add on to 4 of the sides, and you have a choice. You can either have your block so that that's north, south, west and east, or you can have that north, south, west and east. The choice is yours. Taking a 1.5 inch strip. Now the reason why it's 1.5 is this is 12.5 from one side to the other, which is really 12 inches. I need to make it into finished 14, which is why I keep cutting a 14.5. That's 14 plus the seam allowances. So you take 12 from 14, which leaves 2. Well done. 2 has to be divided in half because you need a bit for this side and a bit for that side. What's 2 divided by 2? 1. Well done. You need then a 1 inch strip finished has to be added to the sides, north, south, west and east. But if I want a 1 inch strip, how big do I cut? Yes, 1.5 inches. And all I would do is fairly roughly cut. More is better than less in this particular case. 1 strip onto that side, 1 strip onto that side, and increase the size of it with the addition of 4 strips. This is all in the PDF. When you've done that, to finish it off with a square, work out the sizes of squares that you want, and you'll probably find it'll be wonderfully the entire size of the easy angle, the 6.5 inch easy angle, so just cut round it. I would then take my triangles, stitch 1 triangle onto that side. When you stitch it on, don't fuss too much, as long as it's sort of vaguely sticking out the ends at the same, so straight across, open it out. When you've done that to that side, you'll do it to the other sides and the other sides. And at that stage, that is when you can go back to that nice big square, and you can use this to square it off. You need to end up with this design being 14.5 inches as we have here. And you can use that square and indeed the ruler with it, but that will give you your kaleidoscope. So we've got the kaleidoscope block, which uses the 45-degree template. We've done the Celtic one, which uses the wonderful Celtic bias tape machine. And we've also done, and I've lost it now, someone's pinched my other block. Where's it gone? It's somewhere on here. We'll have to show you the one from here. Oh! Hey! We've got a visitor. Got a visitor. No traders, thank you. Would you like to come in?
Could I come in?
Yes, sure.
Thanks very much.
I'll move the chair.
Thank you very much, because I've got some emails for you.
Yes, good, I'm glad. Now, and you know, I've lost my first block. Listen, I did that one. Someone's nicked the 5-pointed star. Huh? It's gone. It's gone.
It's
gone.
It's not exactly tidy down
No,
here,
it isn't
is it,
tidy.
really?
Never
Shall I
mind.
read some emails?
Yes,
Because Magic
all right.
Hands has spotted it. Wendy Banks. Hi, Wendy. Says, morning, everyone. Lovely to start the day with Jennie on
You
screen.
produced it all off the floor.
The products on the show certainly make quilting a lot easier than when I last did it as a child. Jane Davey has sent in some pictures. Have you got it?
It fell off. You see, I get over exuberant and wildly excited, and it slid off the table. Go on.
This is Jane Davey, and she says, you've been an inspiration.
Oh, wow.
I've
Look at
loved
that,
watching your
Celtic.
classrooms. I've been so inspired I joined a quilt course, and I've made various blocks.
Well done.
This is a work in progress, she says.
That's a much better design than my very simple design.
Oh, go on.
No, that is super. Yeah, great. Fantastic. Well done, huh?
That's done in a similar way, though, is it?
Done the same way, yes.
Okay.
It's just a question of how you draw your lines on your initial piece of paper. Go on, fire away, Debs.
This is Val
Yep.
from Colchester. These are photos of the first quilts made thanks to Jennie. I find patchwork addictive, and like card makers, I have fabric. I use fabric that I just keep because it's too nice to use.
You have your stash. You can't bear, which is why I shall buy these fabrics, you see, Debbie, just to go in my stash. Because then I can stroke them.
They are lovely quality fabrics,
And they're really
aren't
nice to work with.
Yep.
I mean, the purples and greens on this little quilt here, whether you used it for these things, we don't have to make these designs out, but they just go together so well. And I liked the warm rosy ones here, these reddy greeny ones. And just nice. And they are just really, really nice quality, that.
Now then, we do have tools on the show for you to make said quilting blocks. The quilting ruler is approaching now limited stock. So remember, you've got your bias ruler, you've got your, I can't remember what it's called, a triangular
45-degree triangle. What do you show so far?
triangle. £15.29, so almost 90% of our stock is sold out.
Yeah, it's worth having. It really is. You know, grab it quick while you've got it.
Okay.
Simply because I like that. I like the circular ruler that goes with it. This is just a useful tool. It's also useful for remonstrating in the classroom. Thou shalt do what thou is told.
I did get a little worried. Right, gone. The templates that you were using throughout the hour as well, I need to give you the details here. £42.29 is your price, 303,285, and you've got your 2 flexi payments. That means anything else you order at the same time, chuck it in your flexi basket and you'll only pay half of your completed purchase right now. If you just joined us right now, or you've missed a fantastic show, the video will be on our website as soon as we can get it up there. Meanwhile,
PDF's on the website, isn't it?
Yep.
Yes, and it's also on my website.
What's your website?
JennieRayment.com. And incidentally, it's not pornographic.
Oh, really?
Yes, because
okay.
it's got the word mistress in it somewhere, you see, because I'm the mistress of muslin in America, and it does have a slightly saucy picture, but one of the internet providers keeps saying it's pornographic. It is not. I'm a middle-aged lady. Come on.
You can order after the hour. Have a look on the website. It's creatingcraft.tv. You'll see the PDF if you want to download the patterns, and you've got all of the tools that Jennie's been using throughout the show and more there as well. Myself and Jennie are going to be back again at 10 o'clock.
Yes, 10.
Not 11 o'clock, as
10
per
o'clock.
usual. 10 o'clock this morning. So if you can't join us at 10, make sure you set your recorder so you're not missing out on anything. So, cup of tea for you.
I think, yes, most definitely. Yeah, and a cup of tea for you too.
Absolutely.
And we'll see. We'll see everyone
We'll see you again at 11 o'clock. And again, if you've got 10 o'clock. If you've got any questions, do keep those emails coming through. And thank you for the emails that we've had for you in the show today. So, creatingcraft.tv. Check out a few baskets if you're ordering that.